Leaders in the Field featuring Dr. Kathy Kay. Dr. Kay's research interests have been preparing teachers to design culturally responsive instruction in urban classrooms. I first became familiar with Dr. Kay's work before I even began the doctoral program. I was working on a grant to redesign one of my field-based courses to reflect culturally responsive practices, and her work has been at the center of my research area ever since. I'm not sure that her work is classified as seminal at this point, but there is so little research where teacher preparation and culturally responsive practices intersect, so I consider her work as foundational and hope to replicate her work in the future. While I will discuss other leaders in the field, it is largely due to their collaboration with Dr. Kay. Just some background of her education. Dr. Kay received her bachelor's in elementary education. Her master's was in education at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and then she did her doctoral studies at Kansas, which we know is a Research One university. Dr. Kathy Kay currently is a professor of special education at North Carolina A&T State University, and her research interest and engagement focuses on the intersection between general education, special education, and multicultural education, a trilogy that she feels needs to be transformed. Her current research focuses on preparing teachers to design and deliver culturally responsive instruction in urban classrooms and ways to infuse diversity throughout course syllabi and teacher preparation programs. Together with colleagues Trent and O, they conducted a systematic literature review, and they wanted to see how far teacher preparation programs have come in preparing candidates to work with diverse students, parents, and classrooms. In the area of special education, there were 7 total studies, and 3 of those were dissertations, as compared to 39 studies that existed in general education. This gap in the literature is an indicator that we need to conduct additional studies in this area. Soon after the systematic literature review that Trent, Kay, and O conducted, Kay collaborated with Donna Ford, who is another leader in the field from Vanderbilt Peabody College, to outline the characteristics of culturally responsive teachers. Dr. Kay identified 6 characteristics of culturally responsive teachers that included: the first characteristic is that of sociocultural consciousness. This is where teachers understand that the way that we think and behave is influenced by race, socioeconomic status, and language. This is why it's critical that teachers engage in self-analysis and reflective thinking to understand our own identity, biases, and inequalities that exist in schools. The second characteristic that Dr. Kay discussed is that teachers should have an attitude that affirms learners from different backgrounds. We all have implicit bias and should continually inspect and confront our own negative attitudes towards learners of different culture groups. Being an agent of change is the third characteristic of culturally responsive teachers, and Kay describes that as being able to understand the skills that are necessary for collaborative relationships that will best support our efforts when we're dealing with issues of cultural differences. The next characteristic is having a constructivist view of learning. Teachers believe that our learners are capable of learning, and we provide scaffolds to support that learning and align to what they already know. Constructivist teachers promote problem solving, collaboration, and critical thinking. Know your learner is a phrase that we often use in special education, and Dr. Kay's approach aligns with this characteristic of really understanding our students. It means that we take the time to understand their home life and their community. We also recognize the importance of relationships and how these experiences will impact the context of our teaching. Finally, as teachers help their learners construct knowledge, they build on those personal and cultural strengths to create an inclusive atmosphere where all learners feel membership in the classroom environment. Dr. Kay's next project was to work with Dr. Stanley Trent from the University of Virginia. They conducted a mixed design study with 27 undergraduate special education pre-service teachers during their field-based experience. Their research questions were: when pre-service teacher candidates are exposed to culturally responsive curricula during coursework, do they infuse it into their lesson plan development? When pre-service teacher candidates are exposed to culturally responsive curricula during coursework, do they infuse it in lesson delivery during the field-based internship lesson observation? And finally, when pre-service teacher candidates are exposed to culturally responsive curricula during coursework, do they infuse it in lesson delivery during student teaching lesson observations? Dr. K created and copyrighted several documents to support this study. She has a culturally responsive lesson plan template that includes 10 steps for teacher candidates to include. They are as follows. There's a focus and review section, lesson objectives, teacher input, guided practice, independent practice, closure, along with adaptations and modifications, infusing technology, and infusing cultural diversity, and finally, infusing working with families. She also created a culturally responsive lesson plan rubric, and the rubric defines the observable and measurable behaviors that are needed to create each step of the lesson plan template. A 4-point Likert scale was used, with 4 being distinguished and 1 being novice. Additionally, the Likert scale aligns with the Banks framework and his 4 diversity approaches for lesson plan effectiveness. Banks is another leader in the field, and he constructed a framework that consisted of leveled approaches to including diversity into instruction. During lesson plans, observations were conducted by Dr. K, and she used a checklist to evaluate lesson delivery in 6 different areas, including instructional time, student behavior, instructional presentation, instructional monitoring, feedback, critique, and diversity infusion. Too much, too little, too late. So you'll see here the years that the study was conducted, the number of plans that were submitted, and you can see social action is a level 4, that's the highest. There were no teacher candidates that submitted lesson plans that fell into that category, or the level 3 transformative. So you can see the growth in the additive component, but majority of the plans were submitted in either the contributions or additive approach. So the authors discuss some of the challenges that they encountered during the implementation of their study. So too much. The field-based semester is a particularly rigorous semester, and perhaps pre-service teachers were overwhelmed by the number of responsibilities and were not able to compose the detailed culturally responsive lesson plans that they were asked to complete. Too little. So Dr. K and Dr. Trent reflected and decided that teacher education programs must reposition culture at the center of all of teacher education. This means that we have to move away from that fragmented approach of a little dab will do you, and then too late. They also felt that it's important to restructure programs and have a revisioning process for curriculum to integrate culturally responsive principles throughout teacher preparation programs so that it's inclusive throughout all of their courses and not just placed at the end of a teacher preparation program. This again emphasizes the work that needs to be done and the importance of replicating a study like the one conducted by Kay and Trent to determine if there are additional frameworks that can increase the level of culturally responsive instruction. The references that were used for this presentation are from Dr. Ford and Dr. Kay, Kay and Trent, as well as Trent, Kay, and O. Thank you for your time.